How to Train Your Dragon comes to Regal Theaters June 13th, and that gives Chris and I a fantastic opportunity to build something truly epic. A life-size, animatronic Toothless dragon that we can share with fans. Constructing this nearly 9-foot-tall, 14-foot-long beloved character is going to be challenging. So let's dive into the build. This is Prop Shop. The dragon named Toothless first appeared on screen in 2010's animated movie How to Train Your Dragon. That film launched a franchise that has spanned multiple movies, cartoons, merchandising, and theme parks around the character and the world of Berk. Our goal is to build a full-scale, realistic version of Toothless that fans can interact with. To pull this off, I'm going to need the help of my good friend and co-builder, Chris Dotson. All right, so we have been challenged to do a Toothless activation for MomoCon in Atlanta.
Right.
And our original idea when we talked about this was to do a walk-around costume that you would be in, because we both love cosplay and costumes, and you love being in them.
Yep,
but there's two big problems with that. One, at the scale of you in a quad suit, you'd be a fraction of the size.
Like a dog.
Yeah. Right. It would not baby Toothless, maybe.
Right.
The other is that quad suits are rough. I know you do it in a heartbeat, but I know that you would only be able to be in it for a brief amount of time.
Very short amount of time every day.
So a structure that is full scale Toothless, super impressive, but I'm afraid that it's going to be statuesque and not interactive. So is there a way that we can do something to make it feel like there's interaction when it's a static?
Okay. Yeah. So I've worked with actuators before, and I think that's a good way. When you have something that large, you're not putting tiny servos in there. So we're going to use actuators, I think, and we could articulate the jaw. We can move the head.
So animated motion.
So we can animate that motion. Maybe even make him respond to people. Okay. Right. So put some sensors in there so that if somebody were to come up and do the classic pose and put their hand maybe he can respond to that.
Okay.
We can put some lights in there, you know, for like when his building up his plasma or whatever. Right. You know, there's a lot that we can do to where he will actually feel like he's been brought to life.
Okay. Perfect. So we have the plan to do a full-scale Toothless. So how do we actually construct that? I know that you've been talking to a 3D artist.
Juan Hernandez, Okay. And he has built an amazing model. So he's got a little bit of work left, but the detail is undeniably Toothless, right? I mean, there's no interpretation. It is Toothless.
That's awesome.
And so we'll take his final model. Okay. And I think what we'll end up doing is, you know, using my big 3D printer to 3D print some of the key pieces like the head and the legs, and whatever we have time to do, we'll 3D print.
I was gonna say, so we can't print the whole thing.
No. There 5.5 weeks. And that's a big printer, and it can print big things, but it does it slowly.
Okay. All right. So if you're doing legs and the head, then I'll need to fabricate the torso, the wings, and the tail.
Correct.
But at least the torso and the legs and the head all have to match up. So if you're going to slice the model to do the 3D printing, then the remaining torso model you can hand off to me, and I'll go ahead and fabricate based on that so that they theoretically match up. Yeah,
because I will scale the 3D model to be what it needs to be. And once I cut off the parts that are going to be printed, what's left, I'll just hand to you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to let you get to 3D printing. Okay. And I'm going to go grab the model of the torso and start fabricating that on my shop.
Sounds good.
My first task will be leveraging Juan's amazing 3D models to fabricate the body shape that'll match up with the 3D printed pieces Chris will be creating. To do this, I'm leveraging a paper crafting program called Pepakura. This software allows users to unfold and print flat pieces that can be glued back together to form the original 3D model. It took 20 poster-sized pages of parts to build the headless, legless, wingless body section that we needed. To add strength, we glued all the parts to corrugated cardboard before assembling the structure. This was the largest PEP I've ever assembled, and we still needed it to be significantly strengthened before we could leverage it to mount the legs, wings, and tail. To gain that strength, we used fiberglass and photosetting resin. This sped up the hardening process and allowed us to stay on track with the build. Over at Chris's shop, the 3D printed legs are slowly coming together.
A lot of Toothless is going to be 3D printed. Now, while I have a lot of printers in my workshop, only a handful are big enough to tackle this dragon-sized job. To make the most of our limited time, I'll be dividing the work among those printers. Since we only have 5 weeks to bring Toothless to life, I simply don't have the time for errors. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of 3D printing, it's that failed prints are basically inevitable. Over the many years that I've been 3D printing, I've learned a few handy tricks to minimize the risk of failed prints, as well as ways to speed up the printing process. The first big trick is printing with 0% infill. Infill is the internal printed structure that gives your prints their strength, and most projects use about 15% infill. That number varies, of course, but for Toothless, I'm skipping infill entirely, leaving the legs and head completely hollow. This drastically cuts down both printing time and material use. For example, printing just Toothless's left rear leg on my enormous Orange Storm Giga printer with 15% infill would take a whopping 10 to 11 days just for one leg. But by switching to 0% infill, that drops to about 3 days. Now, some of you seasoned printers out there might be cringing right now. Yes, hollow prints are fragile. But don't worry, we've got a solution. We will fill the legs with a dense 2-part polyurethane foam. When mixed, this foam expands and hardens, making the legs incredibly sturdy, even stronger than if we had used infill. The second trick I'll be using is slicing the legs into multiple sections. Sure, my Giga printer can handle printing the legs in one go, but remember what I said about inevitable failures? Imagine losing nearly 3 days of printing because of a failure late in the process. It's really not fun. By breaking the legs down into 3 or 4 smaller sections, each piece becomes a shorter and less risky print. Even if something goes wrong, we lose maybe 1 day instead of 3. Plus, assembling the sections afterwards is quick and easy, often just a few minutes of work, and we can even start assembling the parts while the rest are still printing.
Now that we have the hardened shell of the dragon's body, we'll need to wrap it so the exterior matches the 3D printed parts coming from Chris. Since the body is very geometric right now, we'll need to soften those edges with padding. Wrapping the whole thing in batting provides us with a base that we'll eventually be able to cover with fabric. But until then, we need to figure out how to mount the dragon to the base so it can be transported safely. The basic plan for this is to use a 4x8 sheet of plywood on a platform of 2x4s. This will provide a very strong base for the dragon. To connect the body to the platform, we'll secure the base of the tail directly to the platform. But we'll also need to connect the fiberglass body at the front to the base. For that, we install 2-inch PVC pipes that will run from the platform up inside and through the legs into the body cavity. This will lock the dragon to the platform in a very strong connection. The back legs will also provide additional stability, as they'll be attached to the base at the pad of the feet. And at the top of the legs, they'll be connected through the body and ratcheted down using packing straps that were locked in place in expanding foam inside the back legs. But before we can permanently attach all this, we'll need to cover the body with our final fabric. We tested a leathery vinyl material, but that wasn't as smooth as we wanted for the body. So we eventually went with a 4-way stretchy athletic wear fabric. This allowed us to stretch it smoothly across the body with only 2 seams, one along the back, where Toothless's back spikes will cover, and the other under the belly, which will be covered with one of the leather rigging straps. With the fabric installed on the body, it was time to paint the legs and body. We chose to use a texturized truck bed liner coating for the body and legs. This hid many minor imperfections and provided a nice matte finish with good texture. While we were working on the body, Chris was working on the 3D printed head and his plans to animate elements to bring Toothless to life.
Like the legs, I'll be cutting the head into multiple pieces and printing them hollow. The lower jaw is going to be animated, so that will be one part. The face, which will house the screen and sensors, will be another part. The neck and back of the head, where his ears are, will be the third and final piece. This piece will also take the longest to print, with an estimated print time of 4 to 5 days. Efficiency and clever shortcuts are necessary when you're building a dragon on a deadline. The last piece of Toothless's head is finally off the printer. Total print time for just the neck? 129 hours. And remember when I said prints will inevitably fail? Well, somewhere around hour 120, I started to have a failure. The good news was, I could fix it. It was a minor setback, but certainly not a total loss, and I didn't have to start over. While the neck was printing, I spent more time than I care to admit working out where to place the screens for his eyes. I also figured out how I'm going to make his nose respond to touch. And let's be honest, any fan of the film knows what scene I'm talking about, and they're going to want to reenact it. I absolutely want them to experience that moment from the film, and I worked out just how to do it. Figuring out how to animate his lower jaw was another challenge that I couldn't actually fully work out until all the parts were printed. I found several ways that didn't work before deciding on linear actuators. If you're wondering what the heck is a linear actuator, just picture a motorized rod that telescopes in and out. Power in one direction extends it, you reverse it, and it retracts. I'll use relays to switch the power direction and precisely control the jaw movement. Like the legs, the head needs to be reinforced. Since actuators are pushing and pulling on the jaw, there will be a constant force on the head, so it needs to be very durable. For this, I chose to use fiberglass. I'm using UV resin with the fiberglass mat instead of the typical polyester resin. The UV resin is much faster to cure, seconds versus hours or days, and isn't nearly as strong smelling as the polyester resin. I've used this process for years to reinforce prints. One layer is usually enough that a print would survive being dropped on concrete, but I'm playing it safe and using 2 layers inside of the head. Another minor issue, the screens for his eyes are flat, and Toothless's face is, well, not. I need to make some flat areas around his eyes so I can mount the screens. Once everything is reinforced and the electronics are inside, I can join the face and neck together with some 3D welding, followed by fiberglass reinforcement.
With just a few weeks before the event, it was time for me to focus on the dragon's wings and tail. And for this part, the leathery vinyl we purchased earlier would work perfectly. But this would be a large build all by itself, and it requires a lot of sewing. And while I can sew in a pinch, I wisely deferred to an expert in the field for this large task, my mother. Last summer, I got to work closely with my father on many parts of the Borderlands tactical vehicle build. So it was great to work closely with my mother on this large sewing project for Toothless. Her years of sewing experience were invaluable for constructing the nearly 9-foot-tall wings and 14-foot-long tail. While she worked on the material, I used PVC piping to construct the support system for the wings the fabrics would hang on. Once we had both the structure and the fabric ready, we got to see what a truly huge build this was. At almost 9 feet tall, 8 feet deep, and 20 feet wide, this is definitely the largest build prop shop has tackled. With time running out, we focused on finishing up important details. One of these was painting Toothless's claws. Using a combination of acrylic and latex paints and layers, I was able to create a nice natural look for the dragon's claws. Another element on my to-do list was the leather and metal rigging that Hiccup built for Toothless. That started with the saddle, which may not be seen by most of the audience, being behind the neck, but it also serves another purpose. It hides the hole in Toothless's neck where we can access Chris's control systems and the bolt that connects the head to the body.
So we have the How to Train Your Dragon saddle. This is all made out of EVA foam and then plasti dipped, some adhesive promoter put on it, and then the base coat of spray paint for the different leathers. And now we have to make it look like it's real. We're going to use some watered down black matte latex paint. And we're going to start by brushing in black along the edge. Alright, the edges are now black. Start in here with a black and shadowy, dirty area up at the top. And we're basically going to go down the sides, especially around these rivets. And the goal is is to take enough off that you leave some in the cracks and around the rivets, but you also leave enough texture to make it look like a lived-in piece of leather.
In addition to the saddle, I also scratch built the control pedals, the leg rings, and the leather belts that hold all the control systems on the Dragon. All of these were built in EVA foam and painted to look like either metal or leather. Although done in just a couple of days, I believe that these did a great job of providing an extra level of detail to the piece. Now that we're reaching the end of the build, it's time to connect with Chris again and see how the head and body look together. All right, so we have the fabricated body, the 3D printed legs. You've been working on the head. So now we have to pick that up and test fit it onto the body.
Fingers crossed.
Everything should line up. But we haven't tried this yet. So let's go ahead and give that a try.
Did this to happen?
Wow. Oh my goodness.
I think we have a dragon.
Wow. All right, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty nice. Yeah, so I think the next step is software, getting all of this to work together.
Yep.
Kind of bringing that experience to a point.
Yep.
So that when people come up, he'll feel like he's alive.
All right.
All of these screens, sensors, and relays need a brain, and for that, I'm using a BrightSign media player. I've used these players for years. They're generally used for things like video walls, kiosks, and touchscreens, but they are capable of far more than that, and they've actually been a key part of most of our builds. This BrightSign has 2 HDMI outputs, which is great. That means I can use one player instead of 2, which greatly simplifies the setup. The sensor for the nose connects to the USB port on this BrightSign, and the relays will connect to 2 of the 8 GPIO ports. Now, none of this impressive hardware would do a thing without software telling it what to do. Sure, I could have used an Arduino or Raspberry Pi, but I would be writing code for days. And if there's a way to avoid writing code, trust me, I'm taking it. So instead, I'll use BrightAuthor Connected software, which lets me program everything Toothless's head needs to do with simple drag and drop events. No coding required. Seriously, I can build out his whole control system in just a couple of hours.
Chris? Hey.
Oh my
goodness. You like it?
I love it. His eyes are moving back and forth?
Yep. We got some eye movement going.
Goodness.
He's blinking.
The jaw's moving.
His mouth moves. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it all really came together.
Oh man. And he
makes noise.
Oh my goodness. That is awesome. Did you get the capacity touch thing going?
Yes. So whenever somebody comes up.
That is awesome.
I think that's going to be a really big hit.
Yeah.
I think we kind of let people see if they discover that. Right?
Oh, so many people
because I think so many people are going to want to do that.
It's from the movie.
Right? It's from the movie. So I think that's going to be a hit.
Oh my goodness. This has come out fantastic. So now let's get it loaded up and get it to MomoCon. I can't wait for people to see it, interact with it down there.
It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
The favorite part of any build is when Chris and I get to see the joy our activation brings people. It's absolutely awesome to see fans of all ages meeting and interacting with Toothless. MomoCon is an amazing convention, and it's filled with some of the best fans in the world. Over 30,000 people took photos or videos with Toothless during the weekend. And we were lucky enough to have a few of Toothless's friends stop by and see him. I think there was 60,000 attendees over the weekend.
That's what I heard.
Some of the best fans we've ever been around.
Incredible.
It was truly epic. And we took lots and lots of photos.
Yes,
and
I actually have a number for you.
A number of photos, or
so I can count how many people interacted with Toothless and put their hand on his nose. So that every time somebody does that, that's logged.
Oh, okay, all right.
7,888 times.
Almost 8,000 times.
Almost 8,000.
And that was a fraction of the people that took pictures. So you're talking
1 in 5, 1 in 6, maybe. So somewhere 40,000 people.
I mean, that felt right. I mean, everyone at the convention wanted to see Toothless, wanted to interact with Toothless. And I know the two of us love that part, is seeing people emotionally connecting to the movies.
I mean,
whether the props
people laughed, people danced, people cried.
Yeah, yes.
And you know, just seeing like something we created elicit that kind of a response.
100%.
That's why we do this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why we got into this, is bringing movies to life. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you like seeing behind the scenes looks at our activation and builds, please like and share the video. And don't miss seeing Toothless in action in How to Train Your Dragon, now playing at Regal theaters nationwide. Catch it in 4DX or ScreenX for an even more immersive experience, and I'll see you at the movies.